When desperation forces a struggling black mother to sell herself into servitude to save her dying baby, she expects cruelty, but finds something far more dangerous: kindness. Mercy Williams stands in the Colorado snow outside Samuel Cross's ranch, clutching her fevered infant son, ready to sign away 7 years of her freedom for $50 in winter shelter. But when the white rancher tears up her contract and offers honest work instead, Mercy discovers that freedom might be more terrifying than bondage. Now she must decide whether to trust the mysterious man with haunted eyes who refuses to own her soul. The snow fell like judgment across the Colorado wasteland. Each flake landed with the weight of winter's promise, burying hope beneath white silence. Mercy Williams pressed her son closer to her chest. His breathing came in shallow whispers against the threadbare wool of her shawl. 3 days she had walked through this endless white. 3 days since the last doctor turned them away without looking at Thomas twice. The cabin sat alone against the mountain's shadow. Smoke rose from its chimney in a straight line toward heaven. Mercy's legs gave out 20 yards from the porch. She crawled the rest of the way through snow that bit, her hands like broken glass. Her knuckles found the wooden door. The sound echoed hollow in the thin air. Footsteps approached from within, heavy boots on pine boards. The door opened to reveal a man with shoulders broad enough to block the morning light. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and they studied her with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust first impressions. Samuel Cross said nothing. He looked at the woman kneeling in his snow, then at the bundle in her arms that barely moved. He stepped aside. The warmth inside hit Mercy like a physical blow. Her vision blurred as heat met frozen skin. Samuel guided her to a chair beside the fireplace where flames danced against river stones. He took Thomas from her arms with surprising gentleness, for hands so large. The baby's lips were blue. His skin felt like winter itself. Samuel disappeared into another room. Mercy heard the scrape of drawers opening, the clink of glass bottles. When he returned, he carried medicine and clean cloth. His movements were precise, practiced. A man who had tended the sick before. Thomas stirred as warm broth touched his lips. Color crept back into his cheeks like sunrise over snow. Mercy watched this stranger save her son's life. When Thomas finally slept peaceful in Samuel's arms, she reached into her coat pocket. Her fingers found the paper she had prepared during those long miles through the wilderness. She placed the contract on the table between them. The ink had smeared in places where her tears had fallen during the writing, but the words remained clear enough. 7 years of her life in exchange for $50 and shelter through winter. Samuel read without speaking. His jaw tightened as he reached the part about her obligations, the part where she signed away her freedom to feed her child. He stood and walked to the fireplace. The flames reflected in his eyes like distant lightning. The contract curled and blackened in the fire. Ash floated up the chimney like prayers nobody would answer. Samuel turned back to her. His voice carried the weight of mountains when he finally spoke. "Nobody owns anybody on my land." Mercy stared at the flames consuming her desperate bargain. Confusion twisted through her chest like wire. White men did not tear up contracts that gave them free labor. White men did not look at colored women with anything resembling mercy. "I need help with the ranch," Samuel said. "Fair wages for fair work. There's a cabin out back where my foreman used to live. You can use it as long as you stay." He moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. His eyes scanned the horizon like a man expecting trouble. Mercy followed his gaze across the empty white expanse. Nothing moved except wind through bare trees. "Why?" The word came out smaller than she intended. Samuel let the curtain fall back into place. "Everyone deserves a chance to earn their keep, with dignity." That night, Mercy carried Thomas to the foreman's cabin. The door opened to reveal a single room with a bed, a table, and a stone fireplace already laid with kindling. Women's clothes hung from pegs on the far wall, fine dresses in colors too bright for frontier life. She touched the sleeve of a blue silk gown. The fabric felt like water between her fingers. Too elegant for a foreman's wife. Too expensive for anyone who would live in a cabin behind a stranger's house. The wind picked up outside, It rattled the windows and whistled through gaps in the logs. Mercy pulled Thomas closer and tried not to think about the questions multiplying in her mind, like snowflakes in a storm. Samuel Cross was not what he appeared to be. The rifle she had noticed by every window in his house told one story. The wanted poster she had glimpsed on his desk before he quickly covered it told another. She had fled one danger only to find herself in the arms of something far more mysterious. But Thomas breathed easy in the warm cabin, and for the first time in months, Mercy allowed herself to hope. The dead woman's dresses watched from the wall like silent witnesses to secrets Mercy was not yet ready to understand. Spring came early to the Colorado high country. Snow melted into streams that carved new paths through winter's frozen ground. The earth softened like old wounds finally ready to heal. Mercy worked beside Samuel in the morning light. Her hands had grown strong from months of honest labor. Thomas crawled between the rows of vegetables they planted, babbling words that sounded almost like conversation. He called Samuel Sam now, the syllables clear as mountain water. Samuel taught her letters in the evenings by lamplight. His finger traced words across the pages of his few books. Mercy taught him to cook meals that tasted like more than survival. Their movements around the cabin fell into rhythm like partners in a dance neither had learned, but both somehow knew. The dead woman's dresses still hung in Mercy's cabin. She had grown used to their silent presence, but questions lingered like smoke from a fire that never quite died. Samuel watched the horizon more often now. His hand rested near his rifle when riders passed on the distant road. Mercy saw how his shoulders tensed at sounds that carried no threat to anyone else. One morning she found him standing at the window before dawn. His silhouette cut sharp against the gray sky like a man expecting judgment. "Trouble coming?" she asked. Samuel turned. His eyes carried weight she recognized, the look of someone running from a past that refused to stay buried. "Always trouble somewhere," he said. That afternoon, Mercy cleaned Samuel's house while he worked the far pasture. The wanted poster lay exactly where she had seen it weeks ago, hidden beneath other papers on his desk. She pulled it free with trembling fingers. The face staring back at her belonged to Samuel, but the name read Samuel Garrett, wanted for murder. The reward offered enough money to buy a small farm. Mercy's hands shook as she studied the stranger who had saved her son's life. The man who tore up her contract. The man she had begun to trust with pieces of her heart she thought were dead forever. Thunder rolled across the valley that evening. Samuel came in from the barn with rain darkening his shoulders. Mercy sat at the kitchen table with the poster spread before her like evidence of betrayal. Samuel stopped in the doorway. His eyes found the paper, then her face. Neither spoke for a long time. "Your real name is Samuel Garrett," Mercy said. "Yes." "You killed a man?" "Yes." Samuel sat across from her. The wanted poster lay between them like a chasm neither knew how to cross. "His name was Jacob," Samuel said. "My brother." The words fell into silence heavy as stones into deep water. "Jacob was beating his wife to death," Samuel continued. "Had been for years that night he went too far. Elena was dying when I found them." Samuel's hands lay flat on the table. Mercy noticed the scars across his knuckles for the first time. "I tried to stop him. We fought. Jacob fell and hit his head on the fireplace stones. Where's Elena now? Dead. Died 3 days later from what he did to her, but not before she made me promise to care for her daughter Sarah." Mercy looked toward the cabin where the dead woman's dresses waited. Understanding crept through her like cold water. "Sarah. 10 years old when I brought her here. Sweet as summer rain. She called this place home for 2 years before the fever took her." Samuel's voice carried the weight of mountains. Mercy saw how he blamed himself, how he carried 2 deaths like stones in his chest. "If I hadn't been running from the law, I could have gotten her to a real doctor, could have saved her." Thunder crashed closer now. Rain began against the windows like fingers tapping for entry. "You were protecting her," Mercy said. "I was hiding. There's a difference." That night, Mercy lay awake listening to rain drum against her roof. Thomas slept peaceful beside her, but sleep would not come. She thought about Samuel's hands teaching her letters, about his gentleness with Thomas, about the way he looked at the horizon like a man expecting wolves. In the morning, she woke to silence. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. Samuel stood in his garden, hands deep in earth that smelled like promises. A rider approached from the east. Samuel straightened, his hand moving toward the rifle leaning against the fence post. The man wore a badge that caught morning light like a warning. He dismounted 20 feet away and kept his hands visible. "Morning," the marshal said. "Looking for a man named Samuel Cross. Heard he might be working this ranch." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I'm Cross. Need to ask you some questions about Samuel Garrett. Man's wanted for murder down south. Someone matching his description was seen in these parts." Mercy watched from her cabin window. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a bird trapped in too small a cage. The marshal pulled out a piece of paper. Even from a distance, Mercy recognized her own handwriting. The letter she had written to throw them off Samuel's trail. The letter that was supposed to protect him. "Got a complaint here," the marshal said. "Says Samuel Cross is holding a colored woman and her child against their will." Samuel's face went white as winter sky. The marshal's next words fell like stones into still water. "Problem is, we also got word that this woman, Mercy Williams, is wanted for murder herself. Killed her master's son down in Mississippi before she ran north." Mercy's world tilted on its axis. The letter meant to save Samuel had damned them both. The marshal's words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Samuel felt the earth shift beneath his boots. Everything he had built with Mercy was crumbling like snow in spring wind. "Turn her over now," the marshal said, "or I arrest you. Both." Samuel's hand closed around the rifle. His knuckles went white against the wooden stock. Behind him, Mercy's cabin door creaked open. She stepped onto the porch with Thomas in her arms. "No," Samuel said. The word cut through morning air, sharp as winter. The marshal's hand moved toward his gun. Samuel raised the rifle an inch, not pointing. Not yet, but ready. "You're harboring a fugitive," the marshal said. "I'm protecting an innocent woman." Mercy walked across the yard. Her bare feet left prints in mud still soft from yesterday's rain. She stopped beside Samuel, close enough that he could feel the warmth from her body. "I wrote that letter," she said to the marshal. "Samuel Cross never held me against my will." The marshal studied her face, looking for lies the way men looked for gold in creek beds. "Then why write it?" "To confuse people looking for Samuel Garrett." The truth settled between them like dust after a storm. Samuel turned to stare at Mercy. She had known who he was. Had known and tried to protect him anyway. Thunder rumbled from the eastern mountains. Not weather this time. Hoofbeats. Many of them. A dozen riders crested the hill above the ranch. They moved in a line like wolves hunting pack animals. At their head rode a man who looked like Samuel's reflection in broken glass. Jacob Garrett sat his horse like judgment itself. His face wore the same bones as Samuel's, but twisted by something cold that lived behind his eyes. He smiled when he saw his brother standing in the yard with a rifle. "Hello, Samuel," Jacob called. "Been looking for you." The marshal stepped back. His hand stayed near his gun, but confusion clouded his features. The wanted poster showed a dead man riding toward them. Samuel's world tilted on its axis. "You're supposed to be dead." Disappointed? Jacob dismounted. His men spread out in a half circle, cutting off escape routes like hunters surrounding prey. Samuel counted rifles and revolvers. Too many to fight. Not enough cover to run. "How?" Samuel asked. "Elena helped me," Jacob said. "Told everyone I was dead. Buried an empty coffin while I healed from the beating you gave me." The lie hit Samuel like a physical blow. Elena had died hating him, had died believing he murdered her husband in cold blood. "She died cursing your name," Jacob continued, "thinking you killed the father of her child." Samuel's rifle wavered. The weight of Elena's betrayal pressed against his chest like stones. All these years he had carried guilt for defending her. All these years she had known the truth and chosen Jacob anyway. "Where's Sarah?" Samuel asked. Jacob's smile turned sharp as broken glass. "Sarah's dead. Has been for 2 years. Fever took her." "No," Jacob said. "I did." The words fell like hammer blows on anvil iron. Samuel felt something break inside his chest. A sound escaped his throat that belonged to wounded animals. "She kept asking for you," Jacob said. "Kept saying Uncle Samuel would come back and take her away from me. So I made sure she stopped asking." Mercy's hand found Samuel's arm. Her touch was the only thing keeping him from falling into the darkness that wanted to swallow him whole. The marshal backed toward his horse. This was not law business anymore. This was something older and deeper than justice. "You framed me," Samuel said. "I gave you what you deserved. You always thought you were better than me. Always judged how I handled my wife, my daughter." Jacob pulled out a gun, not pointing it yet, just holding it like a promise of what was coming. "Now I get to finish what we started 3 years ago." Samuel raised his rifle. The movement felt slow as winter honey. Around him, Jacob's men shifted in their saddles. Fingers found triggers. Mercy pressed Thomas closer to her chest. "You don't have to do this," Samuel said. "Yes, I do. You took everything from me. My wife, my reputation, my daughter's respect. You beat Elena near to death. I corrected my wife, like any man has the right to do." The words hung between them like poison in clear water. Samuel saw his brother clearly for the first time, not the man he had tried to save, not the father he had hoped could change, just a cold thing wearing human skin. "Sarah loved you," Samuel said. "Sarah was weak. Like her mother." Mercy stepped forward. Her voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "Thomas," she said quietly, "go to the cabin." The boy looked up at her with eyes too old for his small face. He had seen men with guns before, had learned when to hide and when to run. But instead of running, Thomas walked to Samuel. His small hand found Samuel's leg and held tight. "Papa," he said. The word broke something loose in Samuel's chest. Not his daughter, not his blood, but his child all the same. The child he had chosen to protect. The child who had chosen him back. Jacob's face twisted with disgust. "Look at you, playing father to her bastard." "Don't," Samuel said. "What are you going to do? Kill your own brother again?" "If I have to." The wind picked up. It scattered dust across the yard and rattled the empty cabin where Sarah's dresses still hung like ghosts of better times. Jacob raised his gun. Samuel tightened his grip on the rifle. Mercy stepped between them. Her back blocked Samuel's line of sight. Her body shielded Thomas from whatever was coming. She faced Jacob without flinching, though her hands shook like leaves in autumn wind. "You want to hurt them," she said. "You'll have to go through me first." Jacob laughed. The sound held no warmth, no humanity. "Gladly," he said, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot cracked across the valley like thunder breaking open the sky. Mercy stumbled backward into Samuel's arms. Jacob's men scattered like startled birds, their loyalty bought with coins that suddenly seemed too few. But it was Jacob who fell. The marshal stood with his smoking revolver raised. His badge caught the morning light like a promise finally kept. "Self-defense," he said to no one in particular. Saw him draw first. Jacob lay in the mud, staring at nothing. The twisted smile was gone from his face. In death he looked almost like the brother Samuel remembered from childhood. Almost. Samuel's rifle clattered to the ground. His arms closed around Mercy and Thomas. The three of them stood together in the sudden silence, hearts beating against each other like trapped birds. The marshal holstered his weapon. "Reckon there's been enough killing for one day." He mounted his horse and looked down at Samuel. Samuel Garrett died today, along with his brother. Far as I'm concerned, Samuel Cross is a law-abiding rancher, with a family to protect. The marshal rode away without looking back. His hoofbeats faded into distance until only wind remained. That night they buried Jacob on the hill behind the ranch. No words were spoken over the grave. Some silences were deeper than prayer. Samuel cleared his name through testimony and Jacob's written confession, found among his belongings. The territorial court declared him innocent of all charges. Mercy's case was dismissed when witnesses came forward to describe what her master's son had tried to do to her. They were married in the spring of 1875. The ceremony was simple. The preacher from town spoke words about love and devotion while Thomas played at their feet. Mercy wore one of Sarah's dresses, altered to fit her smaller frame. The blue silk caught sunlight like captured sky. 1 year later, the ranch prospered under their joint care. Samuel taught Thomas to ride on an old mare gentle as grandmother's hands. Mercy tended a garden that produced vegetables enough to sell in town. Their evenings were spent reading by lamplight, her head resting against his shoulder while Thomas slept in his crib nearby. Mercy's belly rounded with their second child. Samuel would place his hand there in the mornings, feeling life stir beneath, his palm like fish in a quiet pond. They spoke of names and futures and the school they might build for the scattered children of the valley. The past seemed buried deep as winter snow. Sometimes Samuel still checked the horizon, but not with the old fear. Now he watched for weather patterns and seasonal changes, the concerns of a man who had found his place in the world. Thomas spoke in full sentences now. He called Samuel Papa and Mercy Mama without question. The boy remembered nothing of their desperate beginning. To him, this was simply how families were made. On a morning in early June, when the valley wore its green dress and wildflowers painted the hillsides, a letter arrived with the weekly mail. The return address made Samuel's hands shake. Sarah Garrett, Denver, Colorado. Mercy read over his shoulder, her breath catching at the impossible words written in a careful hand. Dear Uncle Samuel, I am alive. Jacob told everyone I was dead, but I escaped that night and have been hiding ever since. I have been looking for you for 3 years. I am coming home. They stared at the letter in silence. The dead woman's dresses hanging in the cabin suddenly made sense. Jacob had kept them as trophies, reminders of the child he claimed to have killed but had only driven away. Thomas ran in from the yard, his face bright with excitement. Mama, Papa, someone's coming. Samuel and Mercy followed him to the porch. A young woman rode toward them, across the valley floor. She sat her horse like someone who had learned to depend on herself alone. Her hair was darker than Samuel remembered, but her eyes held the same quiet strength as her mother's. Samuel walked toward her on legs that felt unsteady as new colts. The girl dismounted 20 feet away. She studied his face with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust too quickly. Uncle Samuel? Sarah. She was 16 now, no longer the child he had failed to protect, a woman grown in the hard school of survival. But when she smiled, he saw echoes of the little girl who used to sit on his lap while he read her stories. They stood looking at each other across the distance that fear and time had carved between them. Then Sarah took a step forward. Then another. Until she was close enough for Samuel to see the tears on her cheeks. He opened his arms. She fell into them like a child again, like the daughter he thought he had lost forever. Mercy watched from the porch, her hand resting on her growing belly. Thomas tugged at her skirt, asking questions about the crying woman his papa was holding. She lifted him to her hip and carried him toward the reunion unfolding in their yard. The family circle was complete now. 4 people who had found each other across the wasteland of loss and betrayal, who had chosen love over fear, who had learned that sometimes the dead do come back, and sometimes that is the only miracle that matters. Sarah looked up at Samuel through tears that washed away years of pain. I knew you would wait for me. Always, he said. The wind picked up across the valley, carrying the scent of wild roses and new grass. In the distance, storm clouds gathered, over the mountains, but they were still far away. There was time yet for joy, time for healing, time for the long work of becoming a family. Sometimes the dead don't stay buried, and sometimes that's the only miracle that matters. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.